Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good.
Recording.
My favorite book of all time, and my parents, I made them read it to me over and over and over again, was a book called Gerald McBoing Boing. But it's a story of this little kid who didn't talk, and his parents were very concerned about the fact that he's not talking. But what he could do is make sounds. He could make the sound of a train coming, or the sound of a siren, or the sound of whatever, and all his communication was by making sounds. This book fascinated me, and I just find it amusing, I guess, that as much as I remember that book and that story about that kid who just made sounds, it's kind of interesting that I ended up doing that.
Most people listen to sound. The rare individual can hear what they want to represent the sound that they have in their head. And there's a huge difference between listening and hearing. When you listen, you're bringing something into your brain through your ears, you're interpreting it, and then you sort of either find enjoyment in it, you find that it supports the reality that you're seeing, or an element to kind of complete the illusion that filmmaking is really, after. When you hear sound, you're basically doing that process in reverse. You're actually looking at something and you're saying, how would that sound to me? And so, and you really, in your mind, have to understand what something would sound like without hearing it first.
We don't realize how many things are happening around us during an average day or when we get up in the morning, how many things we touch. Dogs running around, turning on faucets, all the things that we think we might have a very boring morning, but the Foley world, sometimes when we see some of these scenes, you just don't realize how many things you touch.
I think what goes on in my brain is I'm constantly hearing things, so I want to identify it. Oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. So it can drive you crazy sometimes when you're trying to relax.
I refer to my mind as a computer. I know it sounds weird, but that's what I do. And I log these sounds in my mind. And when I hear something, I will log it in my mind so that when I'm on a movie, I can reflect back to it. So I'm constantly logging those sounds in my mind, and so that I know what it sounds like.
The digital mediums are going to take over, and it's expedient because it'll be a cost-effective move. Hiring human beings to do sound effects work, Foley work, footsteps and whatever, it's a costly process.
Can the machine see the emotion of that actor on screen?
How does that digital sound equate to being something done live?
Take the human element out of what we're doing, and it's sound editing.
This is the end of this studio. It's being torn down. Sound One's closing is bittersweet. It's you lose, a once great facility, but the props that are here, I'm going to take as many as I can, and they're going to live for a lot more years.
I don't think Foley art is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. I think we add so much to the process that makes it sound so natural that I just don't think a library is going to be able to do it. Mark my words, that 10 years we're going to watch this. We're not going to have any Foley artists. But yeah, I don't think there's any worry just yet.
I don't think Foley will ever be replaced because it is a natural movement of things on the screen and movement of the characters that you can't find pre-recorded. That's the art of Foley, I feel.
For me, anyway, a lot of times I'll be watching the film and I just know that we can heighten and make the experience more enjoyable if you have those sounds recreated.
So Foley really becomes, a place where people who hear sound can actually perform this magic that supports the visuals, the information coming in through our eyes. And it's truly a creative process. It's a process where people can interpret the absolute edges of reality, and they do that in a way by not listening, but by hearing what something should sound like.
part is the process of creating sound for images on screen. A film is shot. The sound doesn't necessarily get picked up in the recording. What they strive for is the recording of the voices.
Well, because in the later days, like today, we're not using boom mics like we used to use. We're using the body mics that are attached to the actor up here. They don't record anything below the voice box. So they don't record any noise, any sound of a man walking in snow or gravel or pouring a drink. So this has to be replaced.
Production record is going for the cleanest dialogue that he or she can get. So they're not miking for movement. They're not miking for footsteps. They're not miking for those things that will get in the way of dialogue. They want that pure.
Is named after a man called Jack Donovan Foley, whose parents were born in Dingle, actually. And he was born in the States, and he worked out of Universal Studios in the 30s and 40s. And he was the first guy to add sound effects to film. There was one famous story about he worked on Spartacus, and they went out and they'd shot this huge scene with the Roman army, and they brought it back, and the sound, for some reason, the sound had been destroyed and unusable. So they had this cast of thousands, and they couldn't afford to go out and get all the cast of thousands back on again, and they were like, what are we going to do? And he had like this big, huge set of keys, and he just had the idea to, you know, shake the keys and get the sound of all the armor, the guys marching. And now, if you knowing that now, if you go back and watch Spartacus and you listen to that scene, you can, you know, you'll hear the set of keys, ching, 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 ching. And they just thought, this guy's a genius, you know, like, you know, he just saved us so much money, and it works, you know, you bought the sound. So that was you know, one of the moments where they realized that you could augment the soundtrack afterwards, and this was a revolution of filmmaking.
Jack Foley was my grandfather. I was lucky enough to be the first grandchild, and I was born on his birthday. Loved going to the studio with him. As a little blue-eyed blonde girl, you know, and being with my grandfather, it was kind of a double-edged sword, and people were really, really kind to us. And they had magnificent Christmas parties on one of the sound stages where the contract people would sing sometimes or get up and perform, and then there was a theme. You know, it was a circus, or I can't remember what all they did, but it was a special party with great gifts afterwards for each child, which made it very, very special. At that time, I don't know, I didn't know what he did. I knew he did sound only because we had a kitchen with a Formica tabletop, which is a real hard surface. And he had keys and things that were just around the house that I knew he would be making sound effects, but I never registered that he was doing it for a picture. So, and as I say, that time it was a secret. You know, they did it after, it was post-production. And then until I met Ken and David at Paramount that day, I had an idea that there was Foley because I had seen the sign on the screen, but I didn't really know what it was. So I started doing some digging and come to find out that they didn't know who it was. They thought it was a machine, a Foley machine. They didn't know he was a person. So they really jumped on the bandwagon, and they did most of the work. I was there for any help, but they did most of it, and took them 4 years, 5 years before it was recognized for he had the Lifetime Achievement Award. I was so nervous, but I went up and accepted for him.
And in those days, in 57, 58, 59, 60, we would do our own Foley. And I worked primarily at that time on television shows. And Warner Brothers at that time had like 8 hours of TV a week. We had Sugarfoot, Cheyenne, 77 Sunset Strip, Maverick, all those shows. We didn't have a Foley department. We did our own quote-unquote Foley. And the stage where we worked was stage 7, which was a music recording stage, and they had a few pits and a cement slab. And we called our effects Foley effects, stage 7 effects. The Foley thing originated at Universal Studios through Jack Foley, who is extremely talented in that art.
Showboat was the first one. That was, what did you see, 1929. We decided there have been 3 showboats that have been done. I think the one with Helen Morgan was the first early one that did really well. And then the later one with Catherine Grayson and Howard Keel. I have seen that one. Lovely, great music, and it's really lovely. Operation Petticoat, it's about a pink submarine, or a submarine that's painted pink. It's with Tony Curtis, and it's a really light, cute movie, but it's an old thing. And whenever it moves, it makes this horrible noise. And they were trying to reproduce the sound of the engine, and he burped. And they ran it backwards, and that's the sound of the engine on the machine, of the submarine.
They didn't know what to call you. I got credit for the walker. I got a call one day and says, I saw you were a walker on that film. And I said, what's that? They said, I don't know, but you got credit for that. Or they would say something about a stepper, a Foley. No, they wouldn't even, it would just be stepper. And then it became a Foley stepper. And the name just jumped around, and somebody said, hey, wait, I'm an artist. So I said, Foley artist. Or they would say, you know, go down to the stage and do whatever you do. So he said, no, we're Jack Foley. Do Foley. That's what you do.
Actually, there was no sound activity in the motion picture business in Israel because they used to do just documentaries, newsreels, but nobody shot an purely Israeli picture. I saw American movies, and I saw all the sound is there, and I wondered, how come they get the sound, the chariots, those soundmen going after the chariots running while they're shooting? It didn't make any sense, you know, and I realized that probably later on they're recording the sound. I had to create those missing sounds in the studio. I called the carpenter in the studio also, and he helped me. We cut a big piece of wood floor until we came to the concrete base. I started doing all kinds of footsteps on the concrete. I did actually 2 surfaces.
The big transition really came when the major studios started to get rid of their sound effects departments and farming those things out. So a whole bunch of independent people came about, and I was among those. So we would then hire guys who were really good at doing the Foley. We do it ourselves too. But that's how I met John Resch.
He called me, said, hey, can you come over and help? Okay, sure. So I did, and from that, we went on to do E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Now there was a film which there was a lot of unusual Foley in that, at least for its time. That is, you had the footsteps of E.T., which Steven Spielberg said, you know, the first time we see E.T., it's in this field and he's screaming. I'm concerned that the audience, especially the kids, are going to dive under the seats and take off, and this film's not going to do, you know, what it can do, which is it's an incredible piece. So make him sound funny.
But we couldn't find just the right little body sound for him. So, and we tried a dozen different things.
So Joni and I, my Foley partner, went out and had lunch, and somebody ordered Jell-O. It was thrown down on a tray, and we looked at it and started laughing. And the following day, we took that Jell-O and took a T-shirt, taped up the neck and the arms, filled it up with Jell-O, and then I held it at the waist, if you will, and shook it in front of the microphone.
And that became the sound for E.T.'s little body movement, you know, when he would move around, plus the chamois for the feet.
Ouch! It was poison. Ouch! I drank it to save my life. Tink, dear Tink. Ouch.
Bye. I did all the Liza Minnelli's dancing in cabaret. When you're dancing, first of all, it isn't done in one shot. There are different angles, different setups. You cannot get close enough to the performer. You would be in their way because they're every place. You would get shadows. They need a lot of space because they move fast. So then I have to come in, learn the dance, and then they have to mic my feet. I go from the beginning to the end. And then they have the completed soundtrack.
Why don't I hire some dancers to do the Foley instead of me and 4 other guys with 8 feet? Because I was terrible. I mean, I couldn't get in sync, period. And so I would only allow myself to be in Foley with 100 or more people. So you wouldn't know me. And so I hired a young woman, dancer, named Kitty Malone.
There were only about 6, I'm going to say, who could really make a living doing Foley. Now, there were even less than that when I started out. Jim Nelson hired Ross and I to do a job together. That's how I met Ross. He told Ross, I have a girl coming in, now she's not very good, so you have to help her. And he told me, now, he doesn't really know what he's doing yet, so you have to help him. Well, little did I know, Ross was great. And Ross didn't know about where I was. So we went in, and the first take Ross did, it was like a running, and running is so hard. And he stopped and he said, how was that? Now, I don't know how it was, because I couldn't call sync that well. So I just went to silence. So he felt by my silence, it meant he wasn't good. So he said, oh, well, I know, you need me to do that again. So he did it again. He said, how was that? I don't know any more about it now than I did the first time. And I said, well, he said, you want to do it again? I said, no, it'll work. So then I did a take, and I stopped and I said, how was it? And he said, well, it was perfect. It was right on. And so this happened for that day. And next day, we went to lunch. We were having lunch, and he said, could I ask you, what do you do to make a living? And I didn't know what to say. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, how do you pay your rent? What do you do to make a living? I said, well, I do Foley. He said, no, you don't do Foley to make a living, do you? I said, yeah, well, I thought I did. I said, yeah, I do. He said, that's interesting. I never heard of a lady doing Foley, making a living. He said, my company just got Man of La Mancha. Could I hire you? And I said, well, of course. So that's the start of Ross and Kitty.
And I had a sound editor working for me named Ross Taylor. And Ross Taylor would, before Kitty even, Ross would come in with me and 3 or 4 other guys, Kathy Burrow and Freddie Brown and some other guys. And we would do the Foley ourselves. So then when I decided to try to hire these dancers, we also needed to augment them sometimes. So Ross Taylor turned out to be what we call the man with the golden feet. I mean, he was unbelievable. He could, one take, and half the time he'd say, just roll it. And he'd rehearse, and his rehearsal was perfect, and he'd play women's parts, men's parts. I mean, he was just great. So he and Kitty became a team. I introduced Kitty and Ross, because Ross worked for me. And when I hired Kitty, Ross said, is she your girlfriend? I said, no. Well, would you mind if I asked her out on a date? No. 35 years later, they were still together when he passed away. So I kind of feel totally responsible for their romantic career.
We worked together for many, many years, and Ross was great. He was great with props. He did all the MacGyver props, but he did the props back in, even some radio props. But it was just a delight to watch him work with the props. And it was just a delight to work with him. We never got tired of working together. He was the man with the golden feet,
My partner was Ken Dufay for more than 20 years. We were together 21, 22 years.
We started working together about the same time, and it worked out really well. I mean, we both understood each other.
We matched ourselves in temperament and work ethic and sensibilities to a certain extent and to a certain extent not, which is okay too. I don't think you want two people with the very, very same sensibilities there. You want somebody who's going to bring something that you hadn't thought of and vice versa too, but you want to be on the same page. If we were on stage wordlessly, I would know what Ken was going to do and Ken would know what I was going to do. We would just say, okay, roll it. And we just naturally know what each other were going to do. Also, I think that we didn't have the tempers or a mercurial nature. And I say that because, you know, in thinking back, when you're doing Foley, you're part of a small creative group, very intense. You're spending more time with that group than maybe with your significant other in any given week. You're in a confined space. There's not many places you can go. You know, if you're in a snit or in a mood, you're on stage.
We had a good run of it. I mean, Dave and I, we worked together a lot, and we understood each other, and we were both very happy at the time.
So it comes to us, and we fill in the spaces that aren't there sound-wise, or trying to enhance the actions. So a lot of our work is for an M&E, replacing sounds that just are kind of there, that are happening while somebody's talking. In theater, it's more, less literal than film. Normally, film is more literal. You see it and you do it as the sound looks like. And in theater, it's a little more magical. It can be kind of anything and a little more abstract.
To be a Foley artist is to basically play in the sandbox and have fun. That is, I'm asked to do and recreate sounds that we take for granted. Somebody walking into a room. Well, you'd think when you shoot the scene, there are the footsteps. No. Myself and my partner, along with a mixer, we will create those sounds later. And when they're added back into the film, if we've done them correctly, you don't know we've done them.
That it's a combination of being a professional athlete and a musician and an actor all in one. And those are the top 3 of my dream jobs, and I'm doing them all in one job.
You always have the debris of dirt, rocks, and other artifacts falling onto the ground, and that's what we create. Body falls, punches, and so on and so on. It's from a bone break to a kiss, he's able to create that.
It's always a challenge. There's always going to be something that you're asked to do that is not routine. You know, it's not like picking up a fork and putting it on a plate. It's something that you've got to create or make or think about, and that's where the fun and the challenge and the art, if you will, comes into it.
It's painting a picture with sound is what it really is. I would always select the artifacts and the atmospheres, the backgrounds and things, all of the movements and the very special things, writing on the paper and just all of the personal things that are involved. It's a key ingredient in motion picture and television.
A lot of people through the years have tried. And don't ask me why some people have a feel for it and some don't. It's just one of those things, you know, you like and you can do, or you just can't do. Again, we go back to imagination, tempo, coordination, and then love. You don't know which comes first. Maybe love comes first.
Kitty was a great inspiration for me because when I started doing Foley, people would say, well, you can't do big men, you know, you can't do these films or these shows because you're not a big, burly guy. And I would always say, you know, Kitty Malone was Mr. T on the A-Team. And also, she's so petite, but she is just like a little rocket, you know? She is, to me, really inspiring. Very much she was for rights of, you know, women because it wasn't that there weren't a lot of women doing Foley, it's just that the men got most of the accolades because they were the editors who would do their own Foley, and then they would bring in their girlfriends or wives or whomever to come in because we had that delicate touch.
How about we do the scene where Big Mike is walking in the rain? All right. Let me throw some grit down, a little coffee grounds, and some water.
Most people are afraid to go on a Foley stage because it just looks like a big junk pile. Oftentimes it's dirty and there's just all these different surfaces, a room full of old broken down furniture.
New Jersey has the best garbage in the world, and 90% of this is from New Jersey. Bird cages. I don't even have a bird, and I've got more bird cages than a pet store.
You know how it is when you go to the circus and you see all those men jump out of that little tiny car? That's how it is with the Foley mobile. We have props, we have baby carriage, presto. Got all my shoes in here. People collect things for years and years and years. You find new things, but it's like a relationship. You have a relationship with your props, and you hope they live on for years and years. Do a lot of dance movies. We did Dreamgirls and doing Step Up 4 now. So I have to find comfortable shoes that also I can dance. So I'm like deciding, should I wear my lovely green specials or my lovely lame shoes? Hey, Darren, give me a beep, beep, beep. I'm like a trained monkey. If I don't get my beeps, I can't walk.
You're focused and you're waiting for that move and all your muscles are getting ready to fire. It's not like you're sitting there knitting. There's when I'm done at the end of a shift or whatever, I'm mentally fatigued. I'm like, from the amount of focus that's required, and everything's ready to step, move, grab that thing there. So it's 8 hours, day after day after day. You got to be alert. Your reflexes have to be good, and it's tiring.
All right, Greg, this is the locker open and closes for the three main characters. It's all together, that one shot. Here we go. To survive in a Foley stage, you really do need a good sense of humor. We usually, when we're burying a mic, we'll put a Johnny on the mic to stop the dirt getting into the thing, and then we'll put a sock over the Johnny. Because it's a long hours in a dark room, and all the air vents have been cut off because air is sound.
If you see a car crashing, you don't have a car, you have maybe a door of a car, some parts of the car. So you have to use them at the point to make it sound like the car that was crashed was recording on location. If you can achieve that, that is your biggest achievement. If people say, oh, that's recorded in a studio, you miss something.
The first words George Lucas ever said to me were, "We're about to begin a great adventure." And when he said that, I didn't really believe him until I saw the first frame of that film. And when we began working on it, we started with the Foley. We had many, many, many tracks of Foley. I can't tell you how many right off the bat, but maybe 10, 20 tracks of Foley are real. And it took us hours and days and weeks to pre-dub all the Foley for that picture. And we had to, in parlance of sound, you pan something, it means that you move something from left to right or right to left. And you had to follow a character with a pan pot so that if he was walking from center stage to stage right, you'd have to pan and follow him. So it would take a long time to make those moves, and to create those sounds to fit the picture. That's an important ingredient in filmmaking. I think Foley is essential to films that require additional sounds, sounds that normally could never be recorded in production.
When does he fall? At what point?
You're going to react to the rockets as he does on camera and
Right,
fall down.
fall to the
he
back
kind
of
of
the
drops
boat.
his cassette. He kind of falls and stumbles there for a moment. Then he jumps up here onto his gun.
I started working in Foley back on Apocalypse Now. I got my start, you know, I was a kid at the time. I was a GI extra for a while, and then I ended up working in the cutting room and then ended up doing Foley. When we got around to shooting Foley, Walter Murch had us go down to Los Angeles, and at Goldwyn Studios, we had Ross Taylor and Kitty doing our Foley there, and I was there for about 3 months. We had a prop guy there, and we kind of like did all of our Foley there. Walter Murch wanted us to do all the Foley as exterior Foley live, you know, kind of on location. And so we actually set up a U-matic video deck, giant thing like this, and we had boom operators, either Randy Tom or Mark Berger would do boom recording for us, and we walked around and did all the Foley on the boat itself, and with live ammo and things, we were throwing stuff around and kind of doing all the props kind of on location. And then I would take the stuff back on a Nagra and log it all, and we'd go back and cut it in San Francisco.
To be a good Foley man, you have to transform yourself to the character on the screen. When you become one of the character on the screen, whether it's going to be a man, or a woman, or a child, or a dog, you are the dog. You are the man. And not everybody can do it.
I am a performer. I was a magician. Foley is a performance art. You need to act out the character you see on screen. If someone's coming in drunk, well, I will slump my body and start doing this and drag my feet and trip on a little bit of the carpet that's rested up. I look at a character and I say, oh, okay, this guy, he's 150 pounds. You know, but he's a madman. He's got sneakers on, but he's like on crack. So we're gonna do something that emulates that. So every person that I look at, I become that person.
When you're doing the footsteps, there's two parts of Foley. There's doing the character's footsteps and then doing the sound effects props. So we do go through and do all the footsteps in the movie. So all these actors do walk different, and they have different ways that they walk and they move. So the more that you work on those films with those people, you learn kind of their movements, and so you're more dialed in.
It can be a balancing act, finding that emotion and the level of sound that your mixer needs to do his job.
I worked on the blind side, and I walked Big Mike, and I had to become a 270-pound, 300-pound man who was feeling alone and like no one cared about him. And so I really felt heavy, and I gave myself sense of heaviness, and I, of course, selected the right shoe.
The great thing about women as Foley artists is they can do everything. They can do men, they can do women, they can walk children, they can do everything.
You may not be in that same emotional moment that that character is at the time. So you have to get there to be able to perform it correctly. Like for footsteps, if I'm walking, let's say for a prostitute, somebody like that that's in these slinky heels, you can't walk it like you're a football player. You have to become this 100-pound sexy girl in high heels and perform it that way.
Because there are a lot of, especially the younger guys coming up, that are enamored of explosions and everything loud, and I'm the opposite direction. I like the valleys. I like the subtle. I want to hear that movement there. You know, those are the things that enrich a film for me. Is having your quiet moments when you know you're right there with that character and you hear him move forward in the chair, scooch back in the chair.
Recording.
Footsteps. They have to be there, of course. I mean, what Foley is doing is in a large part is adding that natural base to a film, something that you can go to. A lot of times now they're not heard, but they have to be there in case somebody in the dub says, you know, I'd like to hear that person walking.
Yes, footsteps is almost like a dialogue, yes. If you really want to draw their attention to that actor, you do the footstep.
A lot of Foley people, maybe most, who don't have a permanent stage or maybe a semi-permanent stage, which means that you carry your stuff with you. A lot of people then have one or two cases of their favorite props. They might have a small case that has small props, hand props and all, and a larger case with other stuff in it.
Our entire craft is about piecing things together, using a wood shingle on a car door to make a crazy, terrible screech, trying to figure out what makes these tennis shoes squeak, you know, now when they're not squeaking later. And a lot of times, too, the props get really shy when you try to record them. Like, you could have the best squeak in the world, and all of a sudden you're ready to record it. Hey, my shoe's not squeaking anymore. What just happened?
Look, the dogs got my daughter's toy, and they were throwing it away. So I rescued it from the trash because it makes this nice little squeak sound. And so
It's
now,
really actually very hard to get a little tiny squeak like that.
I have a lot of props. There's some cases, even though I work pretty much most of the time at Warner Brothers and they have a stage there, I still carry my little bag of tricks. I have a case with all kinds of paper. And this is everything having to do with paper pens, that sort of thing. Here's some, I use this for ancient, like papyrus and stuff like that.
For me, it sounds odd, but I really enjoy doing paper props. I like doing there's a lot of detail to paper. There's a lot of texture to paper.
I have props from when I was in high school. I have things that I still use that, you know, I found when I was 25 years old, and I have things that I picked up last week that are in the latest film, because as you're going around, you're like, oh, we need to get sparklers. I got to remember to get sparklers. I got to go to Chinatown for sparklers. I can't believe it. But we'll go to Chinatown. But we needed a wheelchair, and it's like, well, where are we gonna get a wheelchair? And you'd start looking around, and I went past a couple hospitals, and sure enough, in the dumpster right outside was a wheelchair. Should have done that the first time.
I give you that.
I give you that. We always quote Elisha Birnbaum because we both worked with him, and he had a very heavy Israeli accent. And if he dropped something in the middle of a take, he said, "I'll give you the drop also." You know, I give you that.
I guess the first rule of Foley is that the most effective sound isn't necessarily the actual sound. You know, we couldn't get a horse in here, so you have to come up with other ways of recreating those kind of sounds.
And these are the horse hooves I made. They're started with the coconut halves, and I filled them with automotive Bondo. And before it's set, I put an orange in each one to make until I got the thickness that I wanted. And then you'll notice there's a notch cut out on each one of them on the edge. And that's because when you impact this into the dirt, or particularly dirt, it traps the air, and it kind of makes a sound you don't want.
Flock of bird wings? Maybe.
For a Dark Night for me, the cape was that was a grueling task, because that, just getting the flump and how heavy that cape was and sustaining it for a long time, that was, for me, that was hard.
Where is he? Here's a few things we use exclusively on Breaking Bad. These are the great rubber boots that they wore in the Super Lab. And the famous mask. This is used for all the pulling off the masks and throwing them and putting them on, and I'm sure you recognize that. And they have these suits, they're little yellow clean suits that they wear, and we get specific movement for that. And this is what we use for their biosuits.
Well, I started working on Breaking Bad in season 3 with Greg and Dominique, and it was different right away. There were so many things that the show required, and essentially Vince Gilligan, that when I first started working on it, I thought, are you sure they want this? And he says, no, it's gonna play. Very specific sounds that they wanted and needed, and then, you know, I'd see it aired and they play them all, and that's what made the show so exceptional to work on, and such a good opportunity, because it was like a tiny film.
Vince, he writes his scripts basically thinking about sound, which is really incredible to do.
Our whole approach to the show is different, and it's like a feature. There's very little music. Everything's kind of hyper real, and the Foley is critical, and it's going to be relied on.
I think for Foley, one time at the very beginning, Greg came up to me and he said, "Are you sure the Foley's okay? Are you using it?" And I said, "Dude, it's all your Foley. It's naked without your stuff. It's all you. And he's like, really? Go watch it again really quick. And he did, and he came back and he's like, that's so awesome. I can't believe we're using that much.
It transports you. You know, the Foley, and in particular on this show, is really used, I think, great to create the whole world and to put you there, to take you out of yourself.
I have never worked on a project that relies on what I do more and uses it more. It's all there. I've never seen anything like it.
That's my bed as a child. I have a mattress that it was passed from my room to my sister. My sister's kids had it, and then she was about to throw them out, and I was at the house, and I touched it, and it creaked horribly. I was like, "You getting rid of these?" She goes, "Yeah, I can't stand them every time." And I have it. That's one of my elements of my bed sound.
For all the lovemaking scenes.
I found some of the best chairs I have. People just gonna throw them away. So I would, you know, see something, if it looked good, I'd pull over and stop. And yeah, if I wanted it, I'd throw it in the back of the car. And my son, he's 20 now, growing up, I dragged him to all the swap meets and what have you, and he would run around, "Dad, listen to this." Dad, he's 7. "Dad, is this a cool sound, Dad?" So I'm always looking for props, because those are the tools that you use to create these sounds. And one prop, wow, is not necessarily just for one thing. It can be used wherever it's gonna work or help. Oh, meat grinder, oh yeah. This is all kinds of great little things. Faucet squeaks, turning a faucet on and off. Thick piece of glass. I could use this.
Well, make me an offer.
I'm thinking 40 for everything.
First time customer, so.
I'll be back.
We'll get the deal, all right.
What's your name again?
Edgar.
Edgar, thanks so much. That's awesome.
All right.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Package it up for you.
All right, gift wrap it, please. Just kidding. I would have to say I don't have a favorite prop. I love all my props. That's like saying, do you have a favorite child? You know, I don't want to insult any of my props.
When I came to the United States in 1960, when I started building S0und, the first studio I built was a Foley studio, you know, and then I had a whole, you know, a big part of the floor to do everything I want, and I built it myself, you know, with a friend of mine. I didn't have any money to get outside help. And we built on a floating floor in the Brill building that contained 4 surfaces, and that was also a mixing studio and an ADR studio. The whole effect with S0und was one big happy affair for me. I must say that at S0und, I had disappointment in a way that as an artist, I call myself artist, you know, artist in motion picture. I had too many obstacles by people that relate to S0und as a business alone. For me, it was my environment that I can flourish, and the money was important just to go on. People want money, money, and money. I did not take salaries for sometimes months. I had to borrow something from my uncle to survive, just so the studio is not going to be declared bankrupt. S0und is running on my spirit. They don't run on my ideas, because my ideas are that you have to share your experience with the community of the motion pictures. money is important, but money is not only thing. And I heard recently that they're disappointed that it's not making as money as it should do, and they're looking for another buyer. And, it's very sad. For me, it's very sad. It was, as I told you, it was my third child.
Over 50 years of post-production sound in Manhattan. Sound One has serviced hundreds of films. And January 1st, 2013, the studio closes, and everything is now, we start somewhere else. So it's an end of an era. I started at Sound One 1983, and Alicia Birnbaum trained me. But what was interesting about Sound One, every sound editor in Manhattan wanted to work here and did work here because there were 90 cutting rooms. So everyone that was in Manhattan worked at Sound One. I mean, that was the big place. And every one of them would come into the Foley room and have a very particular way that they wanted Foley recorded. So my training inevitably was from everybody. So the toughest people in the city would say, no, I want these footsteps like this, and the next one would say, no, I want them like this. And I learned all these different styles, and it was really a great place to be. And I was very fortunate to be where I was at the time. And yeah, I owe a lot to Sound One.
We actually work in many films here, and one of them was, you know, Do the Right Thing, and Casualties Award was another one. And there were plenty of other films, you know, like
Target. Was that upstairs?
That was
Target
upstairs,
was upstairs.
yes, on the 8th floor. But there were plenty of good, talented people worked here.
Yeah, it's been a great ride. You know, we were very fortunate to be around during this time. It was, I guess that's the Renaissance. I guess we're gonna have now, right? I mean, it has to go on to something else. Success.
The art of Foley, as we knew it, is changing. And not necessarily for the better, in that if I'm given less time, myself, Allison, and Mary Jo, if we're given less time, then there have to be decisions made as to what's not going to be done.
Maybe in 10 years, the digital effects will become so compatible with your ear that you won't be able to tell the difference. You couldn't tell the difference between a real tiger and a digital tiger in the life of Pi. I couldn't, and I've been watching films for 60 years, and I could never tell the difference in that film. And I've seen it in a lot of media. Sound effects are going to happen the same way. Foley's going to happen the same way. And I think that eventually, as in all things in movie making and television production, costs and money are the most important factors.
5 to 10 years, probably 5, we will see digital Foley being done like that for all television. Feature films, not so much, certainly low budget feature films, but not so much the higher budget films.
Will it work in the future? I don't know. I think what it really depends on is whether the audience will accept a lesser quality. We are the last of the decidedly low-tech elements in movie making. You can't get lower tech than what we do. We're basically doing the same thing they did on radio mystery shows 60 years ago. We're doing the same thing. We're even using some of the same props. That's low tech, but it's all human element.
Years ago, when I first started, they spoke of the sound droid. It probably was, I think it was Lucas Arts or Lucasfilm was creating a device that was going to make Foley artists obsolete. And I was like, wow, what are they gonna do? And it's like, well, what they're doing is they're storing all these sound effects, footsteps, glass breaks. They're gonna store them in a computer that is going to look and identify what's on screen, and then it's gonna spit it out in the order, and it's gonna make Foley guys obsolete. You're gonna be out of a job.
There was an effort a number of years ago to try and get rid of Foley. There are people that love Foley, and there are people that just don't like Foley. It's too expensive. It's not a profit center for any of these studios. They don't make money doing this. So they would love to get rid of it. We're an unnecessary, we are a necessary pain in the butt. A necessary evil, if you will, as far as management goes. And there was an effort, Sound Deluxe, put a system together that put a lot of money into it. Digitally, they had their Foley artists record for months and months and months of this kind of footstep and that kind of footstep. And this, every possible shoe on every possible surface, every possible way. And they digitized all this. And they tried to get this system so that a sound editor could sit at this magic thing and digitally call up. Great for props, to a certain extent, more successful. Feet, never really made. I mean, it worked, they got it working. The feature clients, as I understand it, wouldn't put up with it. It just sounded robotic, sounded unnatural, a certain repetitive thing to it. Take the human element out of what we're doing, and it's sound editing, basically. And it just didn't work.
I don't think a sound library ever is going to be able to replace a Foley artist because there's no emotion behind those footsteps. It's just, it's kind of like somebody looking at you with a blank stare.
With the coming of the sound droid that was going to put us out of business, I only see it as Foley artists being more important because it isn't quicker to have a computer give you a precise sound. You have to program it to do all that, and it's that programming that takes too much time. I can look at something and do it in 10, 15 seconds. Can you even type that much into a computer? But if the computer is so smart that it just sees it, well, maybe that could work, and maybe you'll get the right sounds.
I can remember there was a time when we would be on the stage and they would send, quote, scientists or inventors, I don't know, they gave themselves the fancy name, and they would sit at the back of the room and study our footsteps and look, and they would look at the stage and they would see what we were doing, and naturally we were threatened because they wanted to take the job away because they wanted to do it digitally or some way. We didn't know how. And I never will forget when I had my little skirt that I loved so much, my little red and white skirt, and I was doing a cloth movement, and that absolutely threw them. They came out on the stage and they said, could we see this? And they felt of it. And they did all these things, and they said, this is one thing we'll never be able to do. We in no way can match her cloth movement to every little movement that they're doing on the screen.
Foley is sort of a real niche and unique craft, if you will. And with that comes tricks, mysteries, things that people do, secrets. There are some things that you might want to keep secret for various reasons. I mean, it's about doing good jobs, and so if you evolve something, your secret or whatever, it's not to say you're not going to evolve other secrets.
Baseball.
You are hitting a head of somebody with a baseball bat.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Hitting the turkey, which has a cavity. I didn't take anything out of the cavity. The cavity was there. Hitting the turkey raw with a baseball bat gave me almost the same sound that you hit a head. But I added another sound to that, you know, hitting a coconut, yes? So the combination of that really gave you a fantastic head bash with that kind of baseball bat, you know, and that was the sound. And, you know, later on, the director asked me, how did you do it? Did you kill somebody?
I'll incorporate my voice where you won't know it. I'll be doing stuff with my voice.
One of the biggest challenges was conveying the weight of the bomb suit. And you know, they gave us a good idea of how heavy that suit was, and they gave us a good description of it, and they wanted that sound conveyed. So my answer to that, unfortunately, was to carry around 2 40-pound weights with me while I did the footsteps for the suit.
Back to the Future, the opening scene of that film, we actually got some motors and things, and the opening of the dog food, that whole thing where the robotic arm comes over and the can opener, all that's, we did all that on the Foley stage. And Chuck was a great innovator of saying, let's not worry about so much about the sound effects per se, let's try it in Foley first. So he'd make sure we had the schedule for that, and we would do that. And another film, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the opening of that film, which is a cartoon, pretty much was all Foley, and is one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Don't burn yourself, baby Herman!
I'm here, baby!
One of the scenes in Silence of the Lambs was the interaction between Clarice and Hannibal Lecter in his glass cage, or his plexiglass cage in the dungeons of the insane asylum.
Good morning.
Dr. Lecter, my name is Clarice Starling. May I speak with you?
The drawer that separated him from her, it needed to have flaps so that he wouldn't be able to get out of it or grab at her and be able to. So we had this drawer that went back and forth, and we needed to create that sound.
One of the cheapest and most useful props in a Foley stage is a chamois. In Game of Thrones, we used the wet chamois for all of the viscous sounds. We had some celery as well, for a little bit sort of harsher bone sounds.
In No Country for Old Men, he goes into the drugstore and he's going to flip that coin.
The most you ever lost on a coin toss? I don't know. I couldn't say.
Well, coins are so loud or not so loud, and so they wanted it to be hyper real because everything in that movie was subtle but yet very realistic. So we had to really make sure that that coin was ringing out, so we would use a separate thing to ring out the coin, as opposed to, you know, when you flip it in the air and stuff like that, it's going to be like not that loud.
All right.
So when I do it in sync, I get a treat. So that's why I'm encouraged to do things in sync. Do it in sync, get a treat. We're not rolling yet, right?
slit my throat.
Would have
been good video. Put that on YouTube.
When we worked on Gangs of New York, Martin Scorsese wanted to hear the sound of the blood in the streets. There is these huge fights where people are getting chopped and hacked. Besides doing all those sound effects, built a little cobblestone segment in our room. We had to do all these footsteps in the blood, in the mud, on the cobblestone.
Hey Darren, tell me, I'm not sure about the resonation. I'm gonna put one sandbag and you can tell me if you think.
Okay, thanks. It sounds better.
I'll use in Drive was this scene in the elevator where they really, it's very beautiful sounding, the soundtrack, and then it's almost as if it's in his head and it's a love story going on in the elevator, and then it becomes an incredibly violent scene. And so we went from a very stylistic, extreme, pretty much nothing sound, just music sound, into these violent sounds.
I love to find an opportunity to add to the comedy. And I have an example of that. Little Miss Sunshine had this broken down VW bus, and I'd have to get out and push a dang thing. So every time they would start to push the bus, I had this fabulous hood or door panel creak, kind of this funky, metally stress every time they pushed the bus. And we put that in every time they pushed the bus. And I went and saw it in the theater after it came out. And there was, I think it wasn't the first time, but maybe the second or third time that they do this, and they really played it up, and they get out and they push, and they're just pushing, and it starts to move, and it goes, and there was laughter. And I just went, awesome.
Well, every Foley artist has a different style. And, you know, I've watched people perform Foley here in America, both Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. I've watched people do Foley in China and in France and in London and in Russia and in Germany. And it's interesting because most people have the need for the result, but they come at it with different approaches, different intentions, and of course, different styles. So the American way of doing Foley is a very winner-take-all, abstract, nothing is impossible, you know, present an idea, present a concept, present a need, and a Foley artist here in Hollywood will give you an answer.
We are a loud people. We like everything loud and in the face. So why would it be very different from Foley? So it's actually a question of taste and sensibilities and our perception, and how subtle you want to be or how unsubtle you want to be is entirely dependent on the director and, you know, the kind of film that he's making. But there are no hard and fast rules, and we have done some wonderful films, not necessarily the song and dance ritual. There is also parallel cinema. There is also different, more realistic kind of films. We have done those. And I think we have kept our soundscape also as real.
As Bollywood, we are much more, you know, music-oriented kind of people. So we get identified with that quite a lot. So that's why I think so the mixes or whatever it is, you know. For us, for every occasion, we have got music.
I heard some stories in Finland about
one German guy, Hans-Peter Kramsky was his name, if I remember it right, and they called him Suitcase Man. He came from Germany, and he had 2 suitcases with him, and he had all the props and shoes in those 2 suitcases. He was sitting down on chair, same time he was walking, and he was normally using just 1 foot. And the same time he was doing other sounds, like walking, and at the same time clanging door or doing some clothes rustle and that kind of stuff. Actually, I was doing the same after that, because I heard that he was doing that. But I just started doing the sounds. When I visited New York, I noticed that Marco Costanzo, he was walking with 2 feet and he was standing same time, and I changed also my technique quite a lot, actually.
I think the main difference between the German way of doing it and the way of doing it in other countries is this traditionally sitting way of doing the Foley. I think it has something to do with history, at least. So, in the beginning, the Germans, as a nation that is dubbing all films, got M&Es from other countries, and people found out, okay, there is something missing, and we need a Foley artist to do that missing footsteps or that missing cup on the table, and there was not much time to do it, and they had to run through it, and they were just sitting on the chair and listening with a headphone and doing everything what is missing. That's probably the beginning of the sitting process.
Hola. Es como ser un niño eterno, un artista de Foley. Lo veo en la gente que es más grande que yo y que hace Foley, y como que tiene una cosa lúdica y un espíritu lindo, porque me parece que tiene mucho que ver con el juego. Y es algo que nunca quiero perder, así que me encanta, me apasiona por eso. Trabajamos más optimizando los recursos que hay. Quizás tenemos menos tiempo, trabajamos más rápido, pero en cuanto a la calidad me parece que somos muy buenos también. Que al haber como menos tiempo tenemos que ser un poco más creativos, y o sea, no tenemos tantos props ni tanta circo alrededor, entonces tenemos que por ahí desarrollar más la imaginación para trabajar más rápido y bien. Porque muchas veces hacemos trabajos para el exterior y tienen que tener la misma calidad que tienen otros países del primer mundo.
One of the, I think he was the associate dean at the time, said, "Harry, why don't you start a Foley class?" And I said, "No one's going to want to take a Foley class. Are you kidding? It's so a niche thing that no one's going to want to take it. And it's the most popular class in the school. Everybody wants to take it. And there's only 15 slots. So I had to figure out how to teach the course and what to do. I decided to add ADR onto it.
I actually took 2 classes from Harry Chaney, and he's a master, he's a wizard, just doing, being able to put all these different sounds and things that you didn't think that could make, tell different emotions, to actually help tell the story.
We had a really unique opportunity here at Chapman because we have such a professional Foley stage at our school. And so we got to have hands-on experience with Foley. And so I always had so much fun coming in here because you're playing. You get to just come and play with toys all day and make sounds with them. And I thought it was so fun the first time I came in here. We had this great lecture on, he'd have us close our eyes, and he'd use different props, one of our professors, to he's like, close your eyes and imagine that you're walking on snow. And he'd just be like, you'd hear it and you'd be like, oh my God, we're walking on snow. And we'd open our eyes and he had a box of cornstarch that he was squeezing.
Whenever I'm doing Foley, I think it's always nice to take risks because you never know what something might sound like. And as I've learned throughout the years and learned from Harry Chaney and through the different master classes that we've had here at Chapman, It's always the combination of props that yield the best result.
It's not a job where you're going to get rich, because you won't. It's a job, I tell my son, it's not necessarily about money. I mean, here I am 30 some odd years down the line, and it's like, oh, cool, what do we get to do today? I love my job and I love my work, and I still have that kind of enthusiasm, and that's a blessing. Not a lot of people that can say that.
I think Foley will be exactly where it is now in 20 years. There'll be some advances in recording techniques. There might be mics that are more sensitive. There may be some kind of a heads-up display that you don't have to actually have a monitor, that you're locked to one side of the room. You can wear this headset that has the ears, and they probably have that now. You know, and probably I could do Foley in 3D.
Still working in a room with a lot of broken objects and rolling around in the dirt, making sounds. Pretty primitive, and that's what I like about it.
On my 3rd grade report card, my teacher wrote that she was concerned about me because I switched between being pensive and making strange noises while walking in hall. So I think it's perfect, because I do live in that world of being completely focused and concentrating on what I'm doing, yet being silly and creative.
I have one of the best jobs in the world. I mean, I can't imagine not doing it anymore. It's gonna be a sad day when I can't do it anymore. And hopefully I can last many more years.
I think I ended up being a Foley artist because I was lucky, because I met the right people at the right time, and because I had a background as an actor, and I think, you know, reading plays and understanding the drama.
Actually, when you don't do it anymore, you're missing part of your life. Really, it's part of your life. I remember when I stopped doing it when I was 68, and it took me a year to get over it. It's like my best friend died, and I have to mourn it. It's like very difficult.
I've always thought of what we do at Foley as being a low-tech craft surrounded by high technology.
People are becoming aware of the art of Foley. And there have been some little things on the internet and stuff where John's been in a few of them, where you see them doing it, and hey, that looks like something I'd love to do. You know, go to work and play in the dirt and, you know, make things. So there will be those people always. And they will find an avenue to get into a stage and, you know, work under the mentorship of good Foley artists. So I don't think there's going to be a change in the way that comes about.